With a Venmo debit card, you can Venmo more than just your friends. You can use your balance in so many ways. You can Venmo everything. Need gas? You can Venmo this. How about snacks? You can Venmo that. Your favorite band's merch? You can Venmo this. Or their next show? You can Venmo that. Visit venmo.me/debit to learn more.
You can Venmo this, or you can Venmo that. You can Venmo this, or you can Venmo that. You can Venmo.
The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. pursuant to license by MasterCard International Incorporated. Card may be used everywhere MasterCard is accepted. Venmo purchase restrictions apply.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Knowing you could be saving money for the things you really want is a great feeling. Talk to a State Farm agent today to learn how you can choose to bundle and save with the Personal Price Plan. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices are based on rating plans that vary by state. Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability, amount of discounts and savings, and eligibility vary by state.
Unfiltered discussions. Unexpected guests. No topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the human condition, personal anxieties, and so much more. The only talk show of its kind in the world. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Hello and welcome, probably. Definitely probably welcome to the show. On tonight's program, engineering nerds have figured out how to engineer floss, because they're engineers, to detect your stress hormone levels in real time. We'll have one of them on the show, but the problem is the floss needs to be used every day to give good biofeedback. And I found a fatal flaw in this research. Who flosses every day? I know a lot of people say they do, but are you telling the truth? The science behind that and the floss that could tell you whether you're stressed halfway through the hour. Then, robots can do lots of great things, like run marathons. Well, half marathons. But they run out of juice quickly. We can do a lot more than a robot can before a refuel. What if robots had stomachs like us? What would a robot buffet look like? Today we'll discuss why the future of cyborgs will be eating rather than recharging. Probably. I mean, they're doing the research on synthetic stomachs now, but how soon till a robot's eating, I don't know, nuts and bolts before it does its thing? That later in the hour. Coming up now, stupid bird news. That'll all make sense in a second. Let's dive in first though, shall we?
Want to be part of The Last Show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Most shows deliver serious news that you can use. As a point of differentiation, we give you news you can't use. The Last Show with David Cooper and special foreign correspondent, Tony Five.
Oh man, love a good jingle, Tony. Love a good jingle. Tony Five is here, and in important news about bird attacks that don't actually involve bird attack news, we are joined by special foul correspondent, Tony Five in England.
David, I genuinely can't believe I've had 4 consecutive news stories. That means one after the other, my friend, about birds, like bird-related stories. Now, the first 3, my friend, were horrific.
They were.
Birds attacking people, birds doing stuff that we shouldn't be doing, birds attacking children, old people, other birds. But no, David, today I bring you a good news story, my friend.
I think with all the doom and gloom bird news, people have needed a break, Tony.
I believe so. So, years of absence. So this is in my home country, David, but in Scotland, a different part of the country that doesn't speak English. They have basically one man, the legend. I don't know what his name was, but he's a man and he has binoculars. He has seen, are you ready for this, David?
His neighbor naked? No.
No.
That's a different guy with binoculars. I apologize.
No, it's not a bronze eagle, David. It's not a silver eagle, David. It's a golden eagle, my friend.
Wait, some Scottish guy spotted a golden eagle?
In Scotland. Ta-gar! 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 Which they're usually not seen. And this guy, apparently, he stopped his car, he got his binoculars out. He was on a mission, my friend. He's seen it. He's already named it Tala.
Mm-hmm.
I may be short for Tallahassee, no idea. But yeah, that's the news.
That links the first bird attack story you did last week in Florida, where a bird was attacking elderly residents, because in Florida, there's a place called Tallahassee. Was this bird named after you?
Yes. David, I mean, he has a little soundbite, a little statement that he said. It's in Scottish, but don't worry, I'm sure you can understand it. Are you ready?
Well, give it to us in the Scottish native language, and then maybe you can translate it for us in English.
Okay, in the Scottish native is, before I could give a fool now, I did already hear, but it was colossal. There was no doubting what it was. Now, in English, that was, before I could get my phone out for a photo, it glided away. But it was absolutely colossal. There was just no doubting what it was.
Wait, can I hear the Scottish version again, please?
Yeah. Before I could get it was absolutely colossal. Oh, there was no doubting it was. Yeah.
There's something wrong with you.
Yeah. It's like we don't need to pay these people to come on the show, right?
All right. So why is it so special to spot a golden eagle in Britain?
David, there's only one of around 50 in the area. So that's what, 16%?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, it's like nothing that they can do. And obviously they're protected by the Scottish Golden Eagle Society, I guess they're called.
You just made that up, didn't you?
No, actually it's called the South of Scotland Golden Eagle Projects. It's SSGEP. Rolls off the tongue, my friend.
It does.
Rolls off the tongue.
And it's just the bird that's rare because the British people killed them off, or they destroyed their habitat? Like, why is it so?
I don't know. Golden eagles, I would more think a golden eagle is native to America, because that's the American eagle, the golden eagle, that's an American thing, right?
That's a bald eagle, Tony. And that's a North American thing. That's
right. I don't think you should hair shame eagles, David. Not every bird has got the follicle manliness, right? Some are follically challenged, David. I really do think sometimes you speak without thinking. What about all the birds that are follically challenged, my friend?
I apologize on behalf of this show to the great eagles of this earth.
I believe it is one of the great eagles, the golden eagles.
I'm looking at a picture of this thing. It is huge.
Exactly. They're not small, my friend. They're huge. They're absolutely menacing.
That thing could take down like a medium-sized dog. This bird does not joke around.
Yeah, or a juvenile adult, or I would say a full-grown sheep.
Before we started rolling here at the commercial break, I said, Tony, are you aware of the news story with the bird that you're about to cover? And Tony's like, yeah, I got it. And then I ask you, why have they disappeared from England? And you're like, oh, I just think it's rare. I'm looking at the article that you were supposed to bring to the show as our resident bird idiot, and it says they were wiped off of England and Wales mainly due to persecution by those who saw them as a threat. So they were hunted to extinction, Tony.
David, they're a persecuted breed. My goodness, they're like some demographics of the country, right? Like ginger people and people that have bad breath, and the golden eagle. I feel sorry for it. Can we do like a telethon for them?
We could. We should do a fundraiser for the golden bald blue eagle or whatever.
Wow. I feel sorry for them, but they are huge. They are like a small person flying around with big talons and stuff. I am waiting for this good news story, this feel-good story of the millennium, to turn into something dark, David, dark.
I look forward to you bringing a horrific bird attack story to the show because, Tony, you got to specialize. You know, this show's not going to compete. Anything that you could assess a show in terms of giving it an award, we're going to lose all of them. But if we create a highly specific category like best radio broadcasters to cover bird attacks around the world, we could potentially win if we specialize.
I like the fact that you said potentially win and no guarantee that we'd win. Yeah, if there was a category in the Golden Radio Awards of North America, and the category was late night radio shows with a Jewish host and a black guy with sunglasses talking about bird related incidents, I still wouldn't put money on it that we'd win.
And in the awards ceremony, they list all the nominees,
yeah,
and they only list us, and then they say, and the winner is nobody.
Yeah. We still lose. I think at that point, our agent would go back to working at Wendy's.
You're not going to win this award unless you read the articles that you bring to the show before we talk about them on the air. Like, come on, Tony. I can't. This is the third time I've asked you a basic question, and then you don't know the answer, and then I look it up, and the answer's right there.
Potatoes, and eagles, apples.
I wish the show were live and we weren't at commercial break when I said, Tony, have you read the article? You're like, yeah. I'm like, are you sure? You're like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've read it. And I said, what's the difference between me reading the article and understanding the article? I felt like I was at school again when the English teacher says, have you read that book? And I'm like, well, I've picked it up.
Tony 5 is here. When we come back from the break, we will be taking your calls. If you want to talk to a bona fide English person who can do a great Scottish translation for you, give us a call at 1-888-505-6644. That number again coming when the whispery lady ends up speaking. Tony 5, when we come back with you, phone calls, and also, if anyone needs anything translated from Scottish, you can do the job, can't you?
Oh, I don't know. I could see you after the break. So that is, thank you very much. I'll see you after the break.
I hate you.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
Hey there, travelers. Kaylee Cuoco here. Sorry to interrupt your music, great artist BT Dubs, but wouldn't you rather be there to hear it live? With Priceline, you can get out of your dreams and into your dream concert. They've got millions of travel deals to get you to that festival, gig, rave, sound bath, or sonic experience you've been dreaming of. Download the Priceline app today, and you can save up to 60% off hotels and up to 50% off flights. So don't just dream about that trip. Book it with Priceline.
Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Like everything on this show, we are jingles first, content second. The music is the best thing you're going to hear tonight, and we're very jingle heavy here on The Last Show with David Cooper. Tony 5 is here, foreign correspondent. Tony, the only man on the show with a theme song. Welcome.
The only man on the show, David. And yes, and when you say second, it's not even a close second. It's not like the 100 meters. This is second where, like, the first person has stormed into the lead. The second person has tripped over, maybe broken his ankle. He's kind of crawling to that finish line. So don't be fooled, dear listener. It's jingle first, 100%. A way back second is the content. Just to be clear.
Well, Tony is here. We are taking your listener calls. If you like jingles and you hate content, call us 1-888-505-6644. That's 1-888-505-6644. Tony, what is our topic for the show today?
It's going to be talking, David. So that's what our topic will be. It'll be talking to one another. Okay?
All right. If you want to contribute to our thoughtful topic of talking, call us 1-888-505-6644. Tony, we actually have a caller on the line.
Unbelievable, my friend. A live one?
A live one. And I want to say this unambiguously. She is from a city called London, but it has nothing to do with the London in England where you live.
Don't believe you, David. Let's bring her on.
We have Jillian in London on the line, Tony. Jillian, welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
David, finally, a fellow Londoner. Jillian, can I get the bus over to see you? We can go out for a kebab or a cup of tea. It's so good. Usually I hear all these foreign people from America just calling in the show. Wah, wah, wah. I'm walking here, pizza pies, all of that. It's so good to have somebody under the king's reign. How are you?
I'm good. I am certainly under the king's reign. Just might be a little far to take a bus.
Yeah, Tony, I don't think she lives in the London you think she lives in.
The London I think is the only London I know, David. As you know, it's lovely here. We've got the River Thames. It sounds like Gillian's just down the road.
Yeah, I live right down by the Thames.
Fantastic. So if you stick your head out, maybe we could see each other. Maybe a little smoke signal or something.
Yeah, I'm right by the Covent Garden Market, actually.
We could go down to the market later, get some food, maybe do a little performance or something.
No, she isn't. She's not. Oh, okay. I'm getting angry now.
Jillian, tell us about yourself. I'm so sorry. Why do you listen to this show? Where do you listen to this show? Who do you listen to this show? When do you listen to this show?
So many fantastic questions. Yeah, I listen to it with my fiance. Will be my husband as of Saturday.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my, Jillian, upcoming nuptials. Where are you guys tying the knot? On the River Thames?
Literally right by, just in a little church in our area, and then going down to a little cultural club.
McDonald's?
And hanging out Yeah, basically. We're having pizza for supper, actually. Very classy.
Oh, that is a typical Londoner thing to do, David. Now you know.
You know what? People always do these fancy catered meals at their weddings, and they're always bad. I feel like you just admit that wedding food is bad and order something good like pizza. It feels like you're doing it right.
And it's the best pizza in the city, and it's like half a block away. So it was all right there.
I want to say, are we getting an invite? Can we come?
Yeah, you're going to need to take the number 1 to the airport, and then you don't really have buses and take a Uber.
How dare you say that?
Jillian, tell us about your husband. Where did you meet him?
Future husband, David. They've not done anything yet. They've just been holding hands. Jillian and Mr. Jillian have just been holding hands. Maybe a little peck on the lips.
Never.
We know we don't go down there. Jillian, tell us everything.
We met at a high school robotics competition, of all places.
Oh, my God.
We're not nerdy at all. It was fine.
Nerd.
Hello, Jillian. I got a computer with a CPC 464 processor. Would you like to mate with me and maybe copy a hard drive? Is that what he said to you?
Was that his pickup line, Jillian?
Yeah, he didn't use pickup lines. He used code.
Oh, God.
God, he's one of you, David.
So just C++, a little Java.
Oh, wow. Jillian, I used to be a computer programmer, but I'm recovering one. Okay, so you met in robotics club. What do you guys talk about in your free time?
He likes to work on AM radio transmissions and likes radio stuff, and then I like art.
God, are you sure you want to marry him? David? David's eyes have just popped out of his head.
There you go.
He's sitting there going, oh my God, I could go. If he's a redhead, you need to be worried, Jillian.
Yeah, Jillian, you haven't married him yet. I'm interested.
No, and we're broadcasting the ceremony via AM transmission, so
maybe
we're not nerds at all.
If you don't have a license for that, maybe you shouldn't disclose that on AM radio.
Oh, we're good. Oh, he's got it all set. But
all right.
Oh my God, he's licensed, unlike us. Well done.
There we go.
Do you want to advertise it? I mean, there's a few people that listen to this show. You can have all of the guests and stuff like that. What do you call? They're not mourners. What do you call people that go to like weddings?
Guests, yeah, guests, not
okay,
mourners.
Fair enough, guests.
Yep, guests.
All right, so he's a radio nerd. You met in robotics club. Is it your first husband? Are you his first wife?
Yes, first. Wow, he'll be my first husband. First wife? Yeah, it'll be our 8th anniversary.
Wow, Jillian, you only get married for the first time once, so you better make it count.
I think that's what Confucius said, yeah, Confucius.
I know. If you're lucky.
So, have you had kids or anything?
Nope. No, we have a guinea pig.
Oh my God, you're virgins. Amazing.
Yeah, this is a big night for you, the wedding night.
Jillian, I thank you so much. You sound lovely. And you sounded, as David put it in inverted commas, normal.
I'd like to think.
Jillian, yeah, thanks for the call. Any reason in particular you and your nerdy husband like to listen to the show?
It's on AM radio. It's just so funny. It's a blast. It really is.
Well, thanks, Jillian.
David, I like the fact that when you ask someone, why do you listen to the show? They say, it's on the format it's on. Yeah, why'd you watch that TV program? Because it's on TV. It's a wonderful answer, which I'm going to start using.
There you go.
I listen to it because it's broadcast.
It's very Nietzsche, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, why do we do anything, really?
We're getting to the deep existential questions now.
Congratulations for this Saturday. And we wish you all the best in love, life, and happiness. And we'll give you a call in a couple of weeks just to find how things are going, if there's a divorce or if David has actually sort of interrupted the wedding. You know, when they say, has anybody here got anything to say to stop me getting married? I can imagine David running in and jumping up.
Somehow I can too.
And throw an aerial at him and a transistor.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jillian. Appreciate the call.
Talk to you guys soon, and hopefully.
Isn't it nice we got nerds listening? I feel like that's a demographic we don't normally hit.
Should we try and hit that? Prisoners and nerds?
Prisoners and nerds and people who just want to have a radio on and any broadcast will do.
I did like that statement she made. Why do you listen to the show? Because it's on the radio.
All right. For those of you who missed the show earlier in the week, Tony Five, our foreign correspondent, was rushed to the hospital the other day with a awful cut on his thumb. And I had suggested that he graft some of his skin from his rear end onto his finger. And thus a character was born. Who was that character, Tony?
David, my nom de plume, Butt Finger Man, David.
Butt Finger Man. And like I said, most things on this show are jingle or music driven and content second. So because Butt Finger Man rose from the ashes the other day, we created a jingle for you, Tony. Are you excited for it?
David Butt Fingerman, as I now need to be called, of the Long Island Fingermans, is here for you today, and he'll be here to stay.
Here for you today, here for you to stay. He's Tony Five as Butt Finger Man.
Also known as Butt Finger Man. It smells, it points, it does everything but Finger Man. Tony Five, Tony Five.
Tony Butt Fingerman of the UK Fingermans. What a pleasure it was. Thanks for being on the show, Tony.
Thank you, David.
Up next, a new kind of floss that can tell you whether you're stressed. But there's a key flaw. If people don't floss, how does it work? I'm David Cooper. This is The Last Show.
Comcast is committed to bringing access to the internet to all Americans, including rural communities across the country, like Sussex County, Delaware.
We were being left behind. Everybody around us seemed to have internet, but we did not. High-speed internet is one of those good things that we needed to help us move our farming, our small businesses, our recreation forward.
Learn more about how we're bringing our next-generation network to more people across the country at comcastcorporation.com/investment in America.
Your nightly dose of unfiltered opinions and unexpected conversations. The Last Show with David Cooper.
What if your dental floss could tell you how stressed you are right after breakfast? Well, researchers have invented a tiny, high-tech floss that measures your cortisol, your stress hormone levels, in real time. Is this the future of stress tracking or just another reason to dread flossing in the morning? I am joined by Dr. Samir Sonkusale, who's an engineering professor at Tufts University, who worked on this. Samir, welcome in.
Thank you for having me, David.
Who even comes up with this idea to turn floss into a stress detector? In all my years, I could not have come up with a concept like this. I love it.
It didn't start like that. I was working on a completely different project related to monitoring stress and how it affects learning and cognition, right? And so what we found was just the act of measuring stress was inducing stress itself. So there has to be a better way if you're trying to monitor stress. So we thought, we need to try and figure out a way to hide the fact that we're measuring stress by sort of integrating it with things you naturally do in your day-to-day routine. So the first thing, if you're trying to work with saliva and saliva cortisol, the first thing that comes to mind is, okay, what do we put in our mouth? So floss was the first answer, and that's what we went with.
I suppose toothbrush, you got all the contamination from the toothpaste, so...
Oh, you got that right. Yeah. So we started with toothbrush. Yeah. How can we put it in the bristles? And it doesn't work. So we need it clean. We want clean saliva fluid. So floss it is.
I love that focusing on measuring stress induces stress. That's so human to me. It's like when we're speaking and we're nervous and we start to sweat, we start noticing that we're sweating, which makes us stressed out more, which makes us sweat more. You get in these horrible feedback loops. I love that floss is what you use to prevent that.
That's right. I mean, my mom has this problem with blood pressure monitoring. So whenever she goes to the doctor, her blood pressure always shoots up like 30, 40 points, right? So, I mean, you never really get a true measure of your blood pressure. We're always stressing out about measuring of the blood pressure itself. So.
Yeah, the thing is grabbing your arm too tightly. And it's stressing.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get back on track.
Yeah.
Measuring cortisol in the morning. Is this a reliable marker for how stressed out people are?
So we have diurnal patterns in stress. So you want to measure at the same time every day. So morning, this cortisol level peaks. And so it's a more consistent way of monitoring if you want to see how you're responding to any kind of treatment over time. So it's a good time to measure.
And tell me about EMIPS. Am I saying this acronym correctly? EMIPS? What does this have to do with your research?
Well, so anytime you're trying to make a sensor, you want something to grab onto this biological chemical that is an indicator of stress, for example, your cortisol. So people use all kinds of proteins and stuff like that to bind. EMIPS is a way of making like a polymer cast for your molecule. So you make a cast. So when the molecule goes and binds onto it, it changes, for example, the electrical impedance or resistance. So we kind of make an artificial cast for a molecule to go in there. So you can actually imagine if you want to sense some other hormone tomorrow, you can make a cast for that hormone, and that cast is immobilized on your sensor, and then you can monitor every time a molecule goes and binds into that cast. So it's like a little, polymer cast for sensing.
Interesting. It's like a shape, and the polymer is a block of wood that fits into the hole of the shape or something like that.
Yeah, you got that right. Yes.
So how does the test work? I put the floss in every morning, and then I put the floss in some device. It rubs my saliva off, or how exactly would this all work?
So while you're flossing, a little bit of saliva is directed from your floss to your handle of that floss. And inside the handle, there is a sensor that has all these MIPs in it. Once you're done flossing, you would just put the floss into a little tiny device that has a measurement unit, and it will just basically read out the cortisol level in the floss.
I know you worked on the engineering side, but what's the practical reason to know one's stress in the morning? Or are there any kind of like psychology implications of this? What would be a practical use for a device like this?
I mean, great you asked that. If you looked at all the diseases that we have today, all the chronic ones, the blood pressure, heart disease, anxiety, mental disorder, all kinds of mental health issues, even autoimmune conditions, the thing we should really be monitoring is stress, right? Because stress underlies all of these different health conditions. And I think it's important that we know how things in our day-to-day life affect stress and affect our stress levels, because then we can do something about it before something really bad happens to your health, right? And so we wanted to basically get a handle on stress. Of course, the project started by looking at stress and how it affects learning and cognition, which is a challenging problem to study in by itself. But I can really see a lot of value in just sort of monitoring stress in our day-to-day life.
What is the connection to stress and morning cognition and learning and these sorts of things?
So, I am not an expert. I am a bioengineer who talks to experts, and they understand that stress actually, it's very natural to know that if you're stressed for whatever reason before you come to school, you would probably not be paying as much attention to what's being taught in the classroom, for example, right? And so, so you, as an instructor or as an educator, you might want to change the way you sort of discuss the topics that you want to chat with them about. And so we are at the moment where we're just trying to understand how stress impacts learning and cognition, and trying to quantify stress is probably the first step towards that.
Okay, well, you're on the engineering side. Let's talk more about this device, this floss hormone detector or floss chemical detector. What else could something like this be used for? It's not just cortisol or stress hormone. Could this be the future of like checking on our mental health wellness, or even, health wellness in terms of like physical health, like glucose or estrogen or anything like that?
That's a great question, David. I think saliva is a very useful biological fluid. And a lot of chemical markers that we have in blood are also represented in saliva. It's not a gold standard. There's a huge fluctuation in whatever you use. So you cannot use them as a diagnostic fluid. But if you're trying to monitor longitudinally, which means how I'm doing day to day. So if you're taking a heart medication and you want to monitor CRP levels, which is one of the markers for heart health, you can actually do that in saliva and see, okay, my heart health is improving, or inflammation levels. Or as you measure mental health, a lot of biomarkers, all the like cortisol, you can monitor to see how you're doing over time, and from day to day. And so you can then or your caregiver or yourself, you can adjust your treatment or whatever things you're doing to trying to get it better and under control.
There's a critical flaw in what you're doing. It's something so huge. It'll throw a wrench in your research. It could prevent the product from going to market. How are you going to convince people to floss? I mean, a lot of people say they do, but they don't. And, before the dentist, they take that week before the dentist to floss every day so that the dentist doesn't know. But I worry that people won't be willing to do it in the morning.
You're right. I am one of those people. I made the floss. So the idea is it's okay if you don't floss every day. Have you been monitoring stress every day? No, right? So it's okay if you're monitoring every once in a while, every time you feel like, and you try to be thinking about this. It looks like I'm a little stressed today. Let me just try to see if I can get a floss, that's it. So, you're not really forced to floss every day, but it's a great idea to have something that is easily accessible at the convenience of your home to be able to measure something.
January 1st, 2024, I made a New Year's resolution that I would floss every day. And I have, except for one day when I got vertigo and I couldn't get out of bed, and we forgive me for that. But New Year's resolutions are a good way to stay structured. Wanting to measure your cortisol every day might just give people the motivation to floss every day. So not only are you helping with all this research, you might even be helping the dentist with this.
I agree completely. You're right on, David.
Well, Samir, this was a fun chat and an interesting thing you're working on. I appreciate you sharing it with me.
Thank you for having me, David.
Dr. Samir Sonkusale is an engineering professor at Tufts University. After the break, robots, they run out of electricity quickly. They gotta charge. They're like your phone. But what if we were to rethink the kind of juice a robot needs? Food, eating, robot stomachs. That's what some scientists are up to, and we'll speak with one of them in a few moments. Let's just hope the robots don't get indigestion.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. From streaming to shopping, Prime helps you get more out of your passions. So whether you're a fan of true crime or prefer a nail-biting novel from time to time, with services like Prime Video, Amazon Music, and fast free delivery, Prime makes it easy to get more out of whatever you're into or getting into. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to learn more.
The last show with David Cooper. Procrastinate your life away with us.
Could you do your job on just one battery charge? Well, neither can a robot. In fact, robots are limited to what they can do based on a charge. But what if, like you, our robot overlords could grab a snack instead of plugging in? So I ask, should bots stop doing a recharge like we know it today and start refueling on the go, metabolizing? I'm here with James Pikul, who's written on this to discuss. He's a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. James, thanks for talking to me today.
Yeah, happy to be here, David.
Why do robots, like autonomous looking things that are human-like? Yeah, we see those videos of the ones by Boston, is it Dynamics?
That's right. Yeah, the ones doing flips and running around and lifting heavy things. Yeah.
I saw one a few years ago of somebody body checking a Boston Dynamics dog-looking robot. And I'm like, why are you doing this? This is the video they're going to use to justify in 1,000 years for taking over the earth.
Oh, the robot takeover.
Yeah,
for sure.
Back on track here. Why do they run out of energy so fast?
Yeah, it's primarily because they have low energy density in their batteries. So what does that mean? Okay, so we wanted to ask this question when we first started doing research on this. And so I guess my background is in robotics and also batteries. And so this kind of fits really nicely. And so we were looking at animals, right? Animals are a really good model system because we could run a marathon. We could go a really long time without eating. And we wanted to compare them to robots. And so what we looked at two things. One is how efficient can animals move compared to robots? And it turns out animals and robots move with a similar efficiency. And that's pretty much because we've designed most of our robots to move like animals. But they can't go as far. And the reason why they can't go as far or for as long, something we call endurance, is because the amount of energy they store is 10 to 100 times lower than we have in a typical human.
How do we store energy, and how could we design a robot that functions similar to us, or at least inspired by us and not using current technology?
Yeah, so we store energy primarily in fat, right? And so fat is very energy dense. It's very similar to like the energy density of gasoline, for example. And robots store energy in batteries. And batteries are a different mechanism, this electrochemical mechanism. And we know that batteries, like everyone knows about electric vehicles, right? Like batteries don't last as long as gasoline. And so when you just look at the total energy available, fat is just way more energy dense than a battery. But it gets more interesting than that. And that's kind of some of the work that we talk about. Because when an animal converts fat to useful energy, it's not very efficient. So we might have a lot of energy available in terms of fat, but we lose about 50% of that energy just being able to access it, to turn it into ATP so that our muscles or our organs can access that energy. And then if we want to lift something, let's say we want to lift a heavy weight, right? Our muscles take energy too, and our muscles are also inefficient. And so it turns out that if you would go from the fat you store in your body to the amount of weight you can lift, you lose about 80% of the total energy. And so that matters because for batteries are not as good, but the way that we move robots are way more efficient. And so our batteries don't have to be as good as fat to make robots last as long as animals, because our actuators and the way that we move is actually very efficient. But batteries still today are about 4 to 10 times worse than they need to be to still be comparable to like a greyhound or a human running.
Is the suggestion that we rethink batteries to be more like a human metabolism, more like an animal metabolism? We store things in a fat-like matter rather than a electric storage-like matter?
Yeah, and that's exactly the premise, is that, for a lot of our robotic kind of technologies that we've developed, not just me, but other labs and researchers, we're often inspired by biology, because biology has millions of years where they've developed these really amazing systems that work really, really well. And so we can draw inspiration from biology for storing energy in robots. Right now, the battery is just this simple block, right? It's a block you see on your computer and your phone, and it just takes electrons in and electrons out. What if we can change the way that looks or the way that functions? And does that allow us to access different ways of storing energy? And so what we've been starting to study in our lab is basically telling us that, yes, that's the case. There are chemicals that we can use that store significantly more energy. And some of them are relatively common chemicals that you find in the food industry. So there's one chemical we're using in our lab, and it's actually found in broccoli. And the food industry, mass manufactures it to make a garlic kind of flavor that they add to food. But that chemical is very energy dense, but it doesn't work in a regular battery. So you have to change the way you design batteries so that you can access that energy. And I think one of the ways to do that is to make animals that kind of digest, they eat or drink. They drink water, they eat metal, things like that, energy dense compounds.
And we're talking a synthetic stomach here to process this broccoli-like extract? Maybe I'm framing this wrong. What would a synthetic stomach even look like? How would it work?
Yeah, exactly. I think we would love to build something that looks like a synthetic stomach. Stomachs are kind of amazing. When people think about intelligence and capability, we often think about our brain, right? But our stomachs have tons of neurons. The second most dense part of neurons in our body. And so there's a lot of computation and thinking that happens inside of our stomach. And we notice that when we eat something wrong, right? There's all these weird feelings that occur, right? And so our stomach's doing a lot. And we'd like to develop technologies that allow us to basically create a stomach-like object where you eat maybe a metal, or the robot eats a metal, right? And then it takes all the energy out of that metal, and then you get some waste. And so you have to remove that waste. So it should look very similar to an animal digestive system.
I'm using my imagination here, but right now, robots, anything mechanical, it uses inert substances like metals, lubricants, things that aren't alive. Are we talking some sort of cyborg-looking thing, like lab-grown meat? Will this be a lab-grown synthetic stomach?
I think you could get there. I think that's really hard, though, because it's really hard to control biology in cells at the scale that you would need for this type of technology. But I think you can start with synthetic things. And, a lot of the synthetic technologies that we use, when you put them together and you make them kind of work the way that you want them to work, they start to actually look a lot like our organs anyway, right? You see this in a lot of soft robotics technology. You have different actuators, arms and legs and tentacles that people are making, and they look very much like animal parts. So we're making fully synthetic technologies, but they're starting to look more and more like what you see in biology.
Now, these robots, would they have blood in them? I guess you're calling it robo blood. Would there be fluid paint me a picture of what a robot would look like.
Yeah, we developed a couple different forms of robot blood that we published in the past. And the nice thing is that the blood is really, really versatile. It's really multifunctional. We can use fluids to actuate, to get robots to move. We can use fluids to cool robots. This is a big problem, especially if you've heard about like AI data centers, right? Like the processing is so hot that we need these really expensive cooling technologies. Our blood cools really, really well, cools our body and maintains temperature. It also moves nutrients. If you want to heal, our blood takes nutrients from something we eat and it brings it to our bones. So it's not just storing and moving energy, but it's also storing these critical nutrients. And we think that robots can have that type of technology where they have these fluids that pump through them. They manage the temperature, they provide energy, they allow self-healing. They kind of enable all these capabilities that we see in biology.
And would this allow bots to work in extreme or off-grid environments, like maybe on Mars or some post-apocalyptic Costco or something like that?
Yeah, totally. And I think so if you look at like the Mars rovers, those are a great example because they were amazingly engineered robots and they lasted, I think, like 10 to 100 times more than their initial mission, but they still broke. And the way that they broke eventually is they had these aluminum tires and they got holes in the tires, right? And so if they had some self-healing tires or some capability to repair themselves, we really just want to make robots. Right now, robots only last like an hour and a half. If you're a flying robot, it's maybe 30 minutes, right? And the problem is that if you look at regular lithium-ion batteries, which are how we're powering all of our technologies today, they only get better at like 7% per year in terms of energy. And that means it's going to take like over a decade before everything doubles. And so it's going to take 10 years before robots can operate for like 3 hours. And that's not really exciting. And so we want to kind of jump forward, try to create technologies that get us there faster so that a robot can operate for a full 8-hour day if they're assisting a nurse, right? Or they're doing something that's really important. We want them so that they're there and available the entire time. They don't have to sit for an hour to recharge when somebody might need them.
Well, I know we're not there yet, but I'm glad your team's daydreaming about it and investigating this technology because it could be the future of bots. James, thanks for talking to me today.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you, David.
James Pikul is a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. After the break, your mother was right. Your friends' personalities can shape your own in good ways, bad ways. How? Answers up next. I'm David Cooper. This is The Last Show.
On WhatsApp, no one can see or hear your personal messages. Whether it's a voice call, message, or sending a password. To WhatsApp, it's all just this. So whether you're sharing the streaming password in the family chat or trading those late-night voice messages that could basically become a podcast, your personal messages stay between you, your friends, and your family. No one else. Not even us. WhatsApp. Message privately with everyone.
The show that asks the questions other shows are afraid to ask. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Have you ever felt like who you hang out with can shape who you are? Well, a new study suggests that is true. There is a measurable shift. Your personality, it turns out, it may be a group project. So what exactly are your friends and hanging out with them doing to your brain? I'm here with someone who studied that. His name is Ulf Zölitz. He's an economics professor at the University of Zurich. Ulf, thanks for talking to me today.
Oh, David, great to be here.
I sometimes tell this to my girlfriend, like, oh, your friend has bad traits. Maybe don't spend so much time with them. She says it to me. I've anecdotally known and observed in myself who I spend time with pulls my personality in that direction. So, what gave you the idea that this might be the case and gave you the idea to start studying this in the first place?
No, I mean, it's basically exactly this idea, right? So when we're young, our moms were always worried about the type of peers we had, right? Hanging out with this guy that skips school and like drinks too much and smokes pot and is pretty lazy. She was worried about, this guy having a negative influence. And we basically wanted to know whether she was right or not, right? So the thing is that it's not random who you typically hang out with and interact with. So we wanted to know, can you actually really identify this impact of the people around you on who you become as a person?
There's sort of this chicken egg problem though, right? Like, am I drawn to people with certain types of personalities and because I am a certain way? Or do I become this way because of who I hang out with? Which one is correct? So let's break it down. What are personality spillovers and how exactly does it work?
Yeah, that's exactly the problem, right? So we hang out with some people, but typically that's not random, right? So we select into groups, we like move to specific neighborhoods, we study at specific schools, we select into study programs, but typically it's not random. So just seeing that you look a bit like your friends, we don't learn that much yet about the causal impact of the personality of the people. So what we did is to actually figure out what the causal impact is. We conducted an experiment at the university. So what we did is we took 1,200 university students and randomly allocated them into study groups. So we basically put them into these groups where they meet and they work together and they solve exercise problem sets, but they also just hang out. And what we did is before we assigned them to these groups, we measured their personality traits. So the big 5 personality traits. And then, at the end of the term, we again measured these students' personality trait and even came back like 3 years, 4 years later to again measure the personality. And this basically allows us to test whether those random peers that I assigned you to, whether they shape your own personality.
What did you end up finding? Positive things, negative things, or both? For example, if I hang out with someone who's hardworking and conscientious, am I likely to get drawn in that direction versus hanging out with someone who's got negative traits like laziness or interest in drugs or whatever?
So we focus on 6 traits, and what we find is there are personality spillovers for some traits, but not for others, right? So not all the personality traits actually do produce spillovers. So what we do see is that if I put you into a group with people who are more open, who have more openness to experience, you also become more open. If I put you into a study group with more conscientious peers, with more hardworking peers, you actually also do become more hardworking. And the same is true for competitiveness. So for some of these traits, we actually do see these spillovers, but for others, we don't see them. We see no spillovers for anxiety, agreeableness. So there, we don't see any spillovers happen.
Interesting. So some negative traits spill over, some don't. What's your take on how long these last? If I'm in a group where I get these spillover traits and then I maybe graduate or I change careers or whatever, change groups of friends, move cities, how quickly will that wear off?
That's a great question, right? You might say like, oh, you hang out for a month or 2. Are these effects really lasting? So what we did is we went back to the students and again surveyed them 3 years later. And what we see is that these spillovers, they are actually persistent. So for 2 of these traits, competitiveness and conscientiousness, we are able to still detect them 3 years down the road. So those peers that you had in the first year of university, they actually have lasting impacts on your personality, which I think is pretty exciting to see, right? So these people also keep interacting, they become friends, and they really seem to have kind of a formative impact on the personality we develop.
As a young person, I had issues with motivation. Like I never did my homework in school. I wasn't a great student. And when I graduated, somehow I got a job at a technology company with all these conscientious, competitive, smart people. And I noticed a shift in myself when I entered the workforce, that I was more motivated. I wonder if this could be a novel fix for kids or young people who aren't conscientious or aren't motivated. Just throw them in a group, thrust them in a group with people like that, and it will have lasting changes on them.
Totally. I mean, the thing that we need to realize is that our personality is not set in stone, right? So this is not something that's entirely fixed. Sure, there is stability over time, but you have influence over it, right? So this is called self-directed personality change. And one way to achieve that is to surround yourself with people who have certain traits, right? So when you entered this tech company, this is exactly what happened. You came into this new environment and you basically observed, what does it take to be successful in this tech company? well, all of my peers are working very hard. So what do I have to do to be successful here? I have to start working harder, And once you did that for some time, this behavior becomes part of your personality. And I think that's exactly what we're kind of scientifically showing with this paper, that surrounding yourself with specific type of people will have an impact. And you can also use this strategically, right? So by choosing your workplace, your neighborhood, your education environment, you're going to have an impact on who you're going to be tomorrow. And I think that's an important insight, an important takeaway from this study.
Let's revisit whether mom was right. If we're around people with the spillover traits that are negative, how can we reverse it? Or are we doomed to have these negative traits if we choose these people as our friends, people we associate with, coworkers, whatever?
Well, I think the message is you're not doomed, right? So if you would like to be a different person, then think down, reflect about your traits, think about what type of traits and characteristics you would like to have to be successful in whatever domain you define yourself, right? And then you can actually work on this, and this is going to be easier if you're surrounded by people who also share these traits. So I think you're not doomed because you can choose who you actually hang out with, and it's an active decision to say, well, I'm going to interact with this person or with that person.
So if someone's listening right now and they're wanting to make changes in their life, what would the ideal personality boosting group look like? Who should I seek out?
Well, that depends on your aims, right? So the students that we look at in our study, they're in university, what they have to do is they need to pass their exams, they need to study. And to do that, certain traits are, let's call them productive, right? So it really helps to be a conscientious student, competitive student, if you're in a business school, right? So this is a productive trait. But in a different environment, this might be completely different, right? So when you're in an art school, maybe, your openness to experience, or your extroversion is much more important. So depending on your goals that you have, it's going to be different traits that will be important to improve outcomes. And you have to sit down and think about, what does it actually take to be successful in my environment? And then you can start working on these traits. And there's a lot of evidence that self-directed personality change can be successful. You can shape new habits, and you can change who you want to be.
Ulf, it looks like I'm going to be bothering you because I need friends like you. I kid, of course. Well, maybe not. Ulf Zölitz is an economics professor at the University of Zurich. Ulf, thanks for sharing your study with me. I enjoyed the chat.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, David.
After the break, do you like drinking 175 billion cups of coffee each day? Researchers have linked high caffeine intake with psychological distress in some people. Details in a few moments.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
Summer's here, and Nordstrom has everything you need for your best dress season ever. From beach days and weddings to weekend getaways and your everyday wardrobe. Discover stylish options under $100 from tons of your favorite brands like Mango, Skims, Princess Polly, and Madewell. It's easy too, with free shipping and free returns, in-store order pickup, and more. Shop today in stores, online at Nordstrom.com, or download the Nordstrom app.
The only talk show with an introduction that mentions its own introduction. And that's happening right now in this introduction. The last show with David Cooper.
Begging for a mention. Yeah, you just want attention.
Could your coffee habit be messing with your mental health? Well, a new study links high caffeine intake to greater distress in people with depression. We are joined by one of the researchers who worked on that to find out what is brewing with it. See what I did there? And whether it's maybe time to rethink that 6th cup of Joe. I am here with Dr. Enda Byrne. He works at the Child and Youth Mental Health Group at the University of Queensland in Australia. Enda, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Caffeine. I feel like this is one of those things that people have gone back and forth on, whether it's healthy for you or not. Physical health, mental health, sleep hygiene, not, for the last 20 years. Why investigate this?
Well, we've been interested in caffeine for some time. So my group does a lot of research on the links between sleep and mental health. And of course, one of the negative aspects of caffeine is that it can affect your sleep. And so that's one of the reasons why we were particularly interested in this. So most of the longitudinal studies have shown that caffeine in low to medium doses is safe and is certainly associated with good health outcomes. But we were specifically interested in it in this particular population of people who've have had a history of depression, mainly because of this link between caffeine and sleep. And so, particularly in high doses, caffeine can also have anxiogenic properties. So it can promote anxiety, and depression and anxiety are very, very tightly linked to one another.
Your research interests me as someone who suffers from major depression. Beyond medication, the single biggest thing I do to modulate my moods and to make sure that I'm like in a good way is focusing on sleep. So I'm always pulling that lever of caffeine earlier and earlier to not mess with my sleep. That link, though, linking caffeine intake to mental health, what is it? Like, should I not be drinking before bed? Should I not be drinking a certain number of cups? Should I be avoiding it altogether?
So I think the thing to say from this study is that we did find a significant effect of caffeine on recent psychological distress. But the one thing that we can't do is really to assign causality in this particular study. So the effect itself was pretty small. So it was around, say, those with higher psychological distress drank on average a quarter of a cup more than those who didn't have recent psychological distress. So I think it's important for listeners to know that this isn't a really huge effect that, you cut out caffeine, it's going to have major effects on your mental health. And I think it's also because we don't know this direction of causality. So because many of the symptoms of depression are, fatigue, lack of motivation, things that can actually be counteracted by caffeine. So what we really need to do is to try and find out more about what this direction of causality is. Is it that caffeine is leading to the psychological distress, or is it that the psychological distress is leading to caffeine? I think certainly if you're someone who does struggle with sleep or notices yourself having sleep problems, then probably limiting the amount of caffeine and certainly the timing of when you consume caffeine, I think is very important. So generally trying to consume before around 3 o'clock in the afternoon would be a good idea, and gives your brain a chance to sort of reset before you go to sleep.
Can you walk me through what your study revealed about genetic differences that might influence how we consume and maybe also respond to caffeine?
Yes, certainly. So like many traits, caffeine is influenced by genetic variation. What's interesting about caffeine compared to many other traits is that there are some sort of known genes of large effect that have been well replicated across many different studies throughout the world that show that a variant in a gene called cytochrome P451A2, which is actually involved in the metabolism of caffeine, that there's a specific mutation in there that leads people to either drink more or less caffeine. There are also genetic variants in a gene called the adenosine receptor that are known to be associated with sensitivity to caffeine. So how caffeine works is that it binds to adenosine receptors in the brain. It's what's called a competitive inhibitor. So it binds to these receptors, which blocks adenosine from getting to its receptors. And adenosine is the molecule in your brain that actually promotes sleep. So essentially, by blocking this adenosine receptor, it makes you feel more awake because it blocks this accumulation of adenosine in your brain. And so there are these genetic variants that have been known previously to be associated both with consumption and sensitivity. And in this study, we were trying to replicate some results from another study that had been conducted in the US that had found quite a few more genetic variants that were associated with consumption. And we investigated those as associated with both consumption and sensitivity to caffeine. And some of those we found did replicate in our study. Certainly the well-known ones replicated really well. And we also found some novel genetic associations too.
Teens and caffeine. That's probably my biggest worry, like young teens. I once tried an energy drink that claimed it wasn't marketed towards kids, but come on, the way it tasted, the amount of sugar. And that stuff was like battery acid, jet fuel. I had the jitters after just one can. Is there a link between teenage caffeine use and depression or psychological distress as you describe it?
There have been some studies that have found these associations between mental health symptoms and caffeine. Again, the kind of direction of causality is the main issue around here. Is it that, teens are getting poor sleep and then consuming more caffeine? Is it a cycle whereby, you get poor sleep, then you consume more caffeine, then your sleep gets worse, and get into these sort of cycles? In our study, we were limited because the participants had to be over 18 in this study. So we didn't specifically investigate in kids, but as we are from the Child and Youth Mental Health Group, this is one of the things that we are interested in. And so this is sort of a precursor study to doing more work around this. And I think you're completely right that there's definitely a heavy level of marketing towards teenagers and young people. And it's something that's not very well regulated, compared to other psychoactive compounds like alcohol and nicotine.
Back on the thread of conversation of genetics and caffeine, could the findings lead to personalized caffeine advice? Like, oh, you've got this type of genes, you've done that test. Well, don't use that company 23andMe because they went out of business and sold your data, but you did a genetic test, therefore you might respond in these ways. We can advise it under these circumstances. Do you see a future where that might be the case?
Yeah, I definitely think that could be a case. And yeah, as you mentioned, that was something that 23andMe did offer as part of their services. And I think as we know more, we do bigger and bigger studies, we find more and more genes. I think we should be able to become much more accurate with that in terms of being able to predict people's response.
Last question. How many cups is too much? Let's be honest here. Knowing what you know, doing research in this area, is my 75 cups a day probably too many?
Well, the standard advice is to keep it to 5 cups or less. And I think that's probably...
That seems high, honestly.
It is high, yeah. I think that's probably very good advice, is to try and keep it below 5 cups. I think the issue becomes around things like energy drinks. It's very hard to track exactly how much caffeine is in those. And even with coffee, one of the problems in the study was we asked people about how many cups they consume. But of course, the type of coffee, the way that it's prepared, has big influence on the actual caffeine content. And so I think this is something that we probably need to be, as a society, maybe a bit more mindful of going forward.
Well, Dr. Enda Byrne is from the Child and Youth Mental Health Group at the University of Queensland in Australia. Enda, thanks for talking to me today. I appreciate you going over this stuff.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Bottoms up with hot coffee, maybe? All right, up next, the virtual reality future of learning, flashy technology, or something that helps. Do students get sick of being in the classroom when everything's all VR and 3D-like? Or is there some benefit over things like Zoom?
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
Oh, such a clutch pickup, Dave.
I was worried we'd bring back the same team.
I meant those blackout motorized shades.
Blinds.com made it crazy affordable to replace our old blinds.
Hard to install?
No, it's easy. I installed these and then got some for my mom, too. She talked to a design consultant for free and scheduled a professional measure and install.
Hall of Fame son.
They're the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings in the world.
Blinds.com is the GOAT.
The GOAT!
Save up to 50% with minimum purchase at Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply.
We work hard to strike the right amount of intelligence and ignorance. The last show with David Cooper.
Is virtual reality the future of learning or just a flashy technology that doesn't help? Well, as classrooms go digital and headsets replace whiteboards, new research explores whether VR boosts connection and engagement or whether it leaves students dizzy, tired, and wanting for that good old-fashioned nap behind a textbook on their desk. I am joined by Robby Ratan. He is a media psychology professor at Michigan State University who has done research in this area. Robby, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, David.
I've always wondered, is popping on a headset better than a Zoom class? Because I know as we go towards the future, and I know it happened during the pandemic, remote learning, whether you like it or not, is increasingly becoming a reality. So does it help more than Zoom is my first question.
Absolutely, hands down. Almost universally, my students prefer to be in headset with me and with each other compared to Zoom. As a broad blanket statement, they do also want to take that nap behind the textbook after too much time in VR, just like with Zoom, right? There's fatigue, but overall, yes, VR is better than video conferencing almost every time.
Great. Interview over. We've answered all my questions. I kid, of course. What is missing in traditional video conferencing software? Is it something called social presence? And if so, what does that mean? Why does it matter?
Absolutely. So media psychology nerds like me prefer to define concepts very carefully. So this idea of social presence is this feeling of being with someone, like you're there together in the moment, which is a synchronous experience. You get that from Zoom, but also there's more to it. There's an exchange of information that you get from being with someone. You feel like you're actually with an intelligent person who can respond to your nonverbals, and you can respond to them, and the flow of conversation is smooth and easy. And we know from video conferencing calls, you don't get that, right? You might get facial expressions, but you don't get proximity. You don't get that sense of being able to pass an object to someone else or to turn during your conversation, your head towards someone and know that it's their turn to talk. We get all of that in VR, and it leads to conversations that feel more personal. Really, it feels like you're getting the attention from your instructor, which is, I think, what you pay for. And the instructor feels that attention back from the students, and it builds on each other. And so the conversation, the learning is more memorable and deeper for that reason of social presence. There are some other reasons as well, and there are, of course, limits. There are caveats here. I say blanket, hands down, it's almost always better until it's not. Do you want me to get into that, or?
Well, yes, and we're contrasting video conferencing, maybe Zoom or FaceTime, but I'm also curious about the contrast to in-person. How does it compare to that?
Sure. So in person, we have high levels of social presence. I can read my students so easily when they're all sitting in a classroom in front of me. I know who's paying attention and who's not. In Zoom, I don't get any of that, and they don't get that attention from me in the same way. In VR, it's a mixture. It's kind of in between. In the field, we sometimes call it a mediated inactive experience. An inactive experience is when you're enacting, when you're doing something, like being in person, you're doing the learning together, you're having that conversation. A pure mediated experience is when you're kind of watching someone else do it, or you're distant from it. So a mediated inactive experience is essentially mediated by an avatar. You, through avatar, get to do the thing with your instructor and with your peers. And so it's better than Zoom. It's not as great as in person until you start to take into account some of the factors that break down communication in person, right? Like you're tired that day, you didn't put on your makeup, or you don't feel great about your self-presentation, you're not feeling confident. Maybe you have social interaction anxiety. We found that in our research as well. So people who are self-conscious or uncomfortable speaking in person actually thrive in the virtual reality environment, and they're more likely to speak up, and they're also more likely to speak up compared to Zoom, because in Zoom, the conversation is unnatural. So again, I think VR hits this happy medium. But we also have a high level of fatigue from VR, just like Zoom fatigue, as we talked about during the pandemic.
Yes.
And it hits people at different times. So this research article we just published, one of the most important lessons is that there seems to be a peak for some people after about a certain number of minutes. For some people, it's 20 minutes. For some people, it's 3 hours. The average is about 45 minutes, but we don't want to take that 45 minutes as the prescription of how long you should spend in VR class.
What happens at this peak?
The fatigue starts to overtake the benefits. So that increase in social presence, which we know leads to greater perceived learning, competence, and enjoyment in the class, it starts to decline. You get diminishing returns, and actually there's a negative return to spending more time in VR. For people who are new, who haven't used VR much, maybe they just tend to get car sick. We know there are some demographic differences in people. If you're not as much of a gamer, there are gender differences. Those people tend to have a lower threshold, 20 minutes, 25, 30 minutes, and they're not comfortable anymore. Whereas the people who spend lots of time in VR, gaming, playing around in chat worlds, they can spend many hours and still be comfortable. So the biggest lesson here for educators is give your students the opportunity to switch between VR and other kind of flat screen formats that are still avatar mediated when they're not comfortable.
Interesting. Oh, so that's kind of the benefit of it, the contrast of it versus video conferencing, traditional 2D video conferencing, if you will, and in person. I am curious, in your study, did anything about the way students interact with each other or with the classroom, the professor, in virtual reality surprise you?
I mean, I guess it's not surprising because I've been doing it for a while, but it's initially exciting to see that students start to play, and I want them to play. I don't want them to be writing their emails and playing video games during class, which they do in person. I see it when I go around behind their computers. But when they're in the virtual world and they're drawing in 3D, or they're building a little scene with objects on the side, or they're decorating the classroom, which could be in a space station or on a mountain or at the beach, right? And they're engaging with the space in a way that doesn't distract too much from their ability to engage in the conversation, but also makes the whole experience more fun for them. They kind of fidget a little bit. That's really great for their learning. The other surprising thing is we switch environments regularly in the virtual world, and anecdotally and then through other research that's been conducted in this context, they learn more from associating the space with the topic. And so by switching the spaces, they're like, oh yeah, we learned about social presence when we were on the moon. Oh yeah, we learned about avatars influencing your psychological perception of self and then your behavior when we were underwater, right? And so that helps them retain better.
It's sort of a limitless possibility of a classroom, like, oh, I associate this environment with this subject.
Exactly. So the classroom's constantly changing, and that's helping them create, more neuron connections, right? If you want to think of it that way, in different areas of their kind of mental mapping of their learning.
Looking forward in the next, 10 to 50 years, I think with things like ChatGPT, with AI, with large language models, we're going to see the face of education changing. Technology, I think, is going to cause a revolution in many ways in education. Do you see a future where VR learning might replace classrooms someday?
I hope not. I hope it augments it, and I'm a huge advocate, and I do teach in VR, and I want to expand access to teaching in VR. But I also worry that we'll end up with a situation where only the people who can pay to be in person get that experience. And so and I think we should have hybrid experiences where people are both in person and in VR together, and that would be ideal.
Well, Robby Ratan is a media psychology professor at Michigan State University. Robby, thanks for sharing your research with me. Appreciate your time.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. June, Men's Mental Health Month. After the break, a couple of dudes, me and someone who specializes in this sort of thing, talking about how to access help for those that, aren't comfortable doing so, or at least haven't been comfortable doing so to date.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
The NBA playoffs are here, and I'm getting my bets in on FanDuel. Talk to me, Chuck GPT. What do you know?
All sorts of interesting stuff, even Charles Barkley's greatest fear.
Hey, nobody needs to know that.
New customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets if you win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. 21 plus and present in Virginia. Must be first online real money wager. $5 deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets that expires 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See full terms at FanDuel.com/sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
When your therapist won't take your calls anymore, there's always The Last Show with David Cooper.
June, Men's Mental Health Month. We are here with mental health and addiction expert Yonah Budd, who can be found at yonahbudd.com, to discuss why men don't always talk about mental health issues, probably. Welcome.
Nice to be here, David. Thank you.
How was that for an introduction?
That was great. Love it. You should do radio.
Yeah, here we are. I'm someone who often talks about mental health struggles a lot on the radio. In fact, we do a weekly mental health segment on Wednesdays called Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday. But a lot of people don't.
Oh, I was trying to figure out why I'm not being invited every week.
Oh, it's a specific guy. But I mean, you should be invited every week. But
yes,
Therapy Thursdays on a Wednesday, unfortunately, is someone else. It's someone else's gig.
Oh, I got you. Oh, okay.
We could have you on for Terrible Tuesdays on a Monday or something like that. Yeah,
I love it. Yeah, anything regular would be great. Yeah. So you know what, David, you're 100% right. Men tend to not share their stuff. I don't know what it is about us. I just think it's a thing, where growing up, certainly in my house, you didn't share. And I grew up with a house full of boys. There's 4 of us. We didn't share our feelings. It wasn't a feelings kind of environment. My father never did. My grandfather never did. My older brothers certainly don't. I do as a result of, decades of therapy. But I think men generally feel that if they're talking about stuff that's bugging them, it's a sign of weakness. And in fact, frankly, my friend, it's a sign of strength.
Yeah, a sign of weakness is being like emotionally stunted, unable to deal with your emotions, unable to talk to other people about theirs or support people through theirs. That sounds like a pretty big weakness, a pretty big gap in someone's personality, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think it's, whether it's a gap or a weakness, it certainly holds you back from getting the kind of support you need from people when you probably need it. And when we don't talk about the stuff that bugs us, we tend to go within ourselves. Many people end up, drinking, doing drugs, gambling, doing other things to kind of get over their mental health discomfort.
Ooh, the fun stuff, as someone who's sober and stays away from casinos.
Exactly. So, we tend to, and not just men, women do as well, but more so men tend to bury their discomfort in things that probably aren't good for us.
And that's not criticism from me. Like, a lot of people are raised this way. I think maybe less so now. Like, I'm not sure about Gen Zs, but when I was growing up as a millennial and when people in generations before me, they weren't really taught that this was a good thing. They were taught the kind of upbringing you describe, where we don't talk about our mental health. It's a sign of strength. So I don't criticize people for being like a certain way, but not wanting to change, not wanting to seek help when you need it. That's where we run into problems.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think it's a good statement. I think it even goes further than that. I think if you're, if you have children, I tell parents this all the time. If you have children, parents want to send their kids to summer camp and send them to the best schools and buy them nice clothes. But the thing kids really need is positive modeled behavior from their parents. So when dad's having a struggle at work and comes home and pours 2 inches of scotch into a glass and said, "Rough day, I just need to have a drink," eventually your 14-year-old at 16 realizes, you know what, I had a bad day at school today. Maybe I should have one of those drinks my dad has. Versus, I'm going for a walk, I'm going for a run, I'm going to the gym, I'm going downstairs to do some meditation. Like, giving up those kinds of signals really help your children and yourself, frankly, deal with this kind of stuff. So the real trick is not to suck it up, buttercup, like we used to think about as a kid growing up, but to actually take your discomforts head on and get the support and help that you need, certainly from your loved ones and then from people who are properly trained to do that kind of stuff.
Positive modeled behavior from parents. I'm taking notes and I'm looking at you, Clara Cooper and Richard Cooper. Sorry, I got off topic there. For those that find themselves as adults struggling, no resources to help them, they feel like no experience, dealing with their problems in a way that involves like professional help or help from others. What's like step one?
I think step one is, I would suggest step one is identifying the fact that you have a problem, which is outside your personal ability to manage on your own. I tell people like this, if you have a toothache, you go to a dentist. If your arm's sore, you go to a doctor. If you got a wart or something on your foot, you get it removed. If something is bothering you emotionally and psychologically, it manifests itself in lots of ways. Pretending it doesn't exist or just, living with it isn't a solution. It's like an emotional cancer. If you don't deal with it and get it cut out, ultimately it could be the death of you.
So that was step one for me. Step two for me was starting to learn something I'll call emotional intelligence or emotional, like a vocabulary around my emotions. Because when I first started going to therapy after me and my ex-wife split, I found myself unable to talk about and put names to my feelings. And so things that were happening in my life, things that were happening to my brain, things that were happening to my mood state, I could not describe. I was sort of inarticulate. It was as if there was this language, let's call it French, although I can't speak a little French, bad example, Spanish, that I found myself needing to speak and unable to speak. And so learning the language around having to name feelings, how to describe what I was going through, that was kind of the first big breakthrough for me as someone dealing with my own mental health problems. I kind of describe that scenario to people, and it kind of just helps them realize what comes after they realize they need help.
Yeah, I think it's, learning the vocabulary, learning how to describe your feelings. One of the good ways to do that, one of the positive methods to start dealing with that is to start writing down your feelings. People tell me, like I'm starting to journal, but I'm not sure what to write down. I said, you don't study for journaling. You just write stuff down. My tummy feels like it's burning. I got pains in my neck. My head is pounding. I feel like I can't really move. I don't want to leave my house. Those are descriptions of how you feel. And then it's much easier to do like you did, quite frankly. It's much easier to attach, the appropriate vocabulary to those types of feelings. Like everyone talks about, I have anxiety disorder, or I have ADD. Everybody in the world now has ADD because they're reading about it, right? I have depression. So people are putting labels to things that they think fit them, and they may or may not. You may self-describe as someone with, attention deficit disorder or ADD and not have any part of it. It might just be that you can't focus, you can't pay attention because the material is not good, or you're not reading it properly, or it brings back bad memories and triggers, discomfort for you from previous experiences. Being able to do what you do, exactly like you recommended, understanding what the words are so that you can just talk about it intelligently. If I decided to become a snowboarder tomorrow and wanted to get into the world of snowboarding, if I was going to talk to my buddies about snowboarding, I need to use the vocabulary that snowboarders use when they're talking about snowboarding.
Launch over it, bro.
Yeah, whatever. I don't know what a half pipe is or a quarter pipe or what a pipe is at all, unless it's got, drugs in it, and we don't want to use any of those, right? So, it's understanding the world you're in, and the world of getting to a place of good mental health is requires navigation, requires vocabulary, requires risk and reward and all of those things. It's not just something that I think tomorrow I'm just going to go get some help. Help around what, and who's the appropriate person to help you?
Any recommendations for resources for people struggling who have never got help before?
Yeah, I just put in a Google search, and I'm feeling overwhelmed and can't sleep at night, and you'll get a zillion different things you can attend or read or listen to on YouTube, and support groups. If you can find anonymous support groups, that's a great place to start.
Well, Yonah Budd is a mental health and addiction expert. You can find him at yonahbudd.com. That's YONAHBUDD. I spelled it out for them. Yonah, thanks for talking to me today. Happy, maybe, Mental Health Month for men.
Yeah, happy week for you, and look forward to doing this again, David. By the way, you look great.
Oh, thank you. That is the show as ever. Thanks for listening to it. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast if you missed any of tonight or you want to check out any shows that you missed as well. The place for more details is www.lastshow.pizza. That's lastshow.pizza, not .com. And if you want to be a part of the program, you can always call 1-888-505-6644. If the lines aren't open, leave a message. 1-888-505-6644. I'm David Cooper, and well, this isn't the first show.